Hello, everybody. It's so nice to have you here. I'm Sasha, and I am with somebody that I truly love, that it's so loved so deeply in my heart, which is my sister, Michelle Kasey.
Hi, Sasha. Hi, everyone. And that love is so full body returned.
Yeah, so Michelle is a sex coach. She works mainly with female sexuality. Her knowledge is pretty extensive. She has also worked with men beautifully. She's so passionate about her work. She's an artist. You can see her beautiful art on her Instagram page and on her Facebook. She's just such an inspiration. And something that she works a lot with is the power of pleasure and the power particularly of self-pleasure. And that's what we're going to be discussing today.
Yes, thank you for that beautiful introduction, Sasha. You give me body tingles.
Yes. So, um, first of all, I think that this whole topic, self-pleasure, is like this, like somebody said in one TED talk recently, it's the new meditation, right? It's our new meditation. It's connecting to our body, connecting to our essence. Um, what does self-pleasure mean to you? How did you discover the potential that this has for you?
Beautiful question. And yeah, I love that offering. I think it was it Keely that did that TED talk. And my journey with self-pleasure has been really interesting. I started self-pleasuring from a young age, but quickly formed really narrow, habituated, fast, um, almost disembodied self-pleasure habits.
Yeah.
And it was really, to me at that time, just a way to release sexual tension. I would just feel this build up in my body as a young person and just want to get it out. Um, and that's all that really represented to me. It really existed in this cloud of kind of naughtiness and relative shame, and I shouldn't be doing this, but my body's telling me to do it, so I'm gonna do it anyway. um, and really, for me, the way I really started to change my self-pleasure habits was just getting a new sex education was my starting point. um, it really started with just like integrating some of the shame, changing my mindset around it. And then it was when I studied alongside you with Layla Martin that I really shifted into a much more holistic way of experiencing self-pleasure, where there was so much more spaciousness to just expand pleasure, expand the experience, and really experience like deep embodiment and deep transcendence and all of the magic that can come from that. Um, yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. Yes, that has been our experience, just to live these practices as this opening experience, right? Like opening about a bottle. And I discovered something in what you're saying. You mentioned that your body was asking you to do that. So in your mind, it was when you were younger, there was this sensation that you had to get that off your system, but your body was asking you to do that. So the image that comes to mind is that of the genie in the bottle, like literally opening a bottle and allowing the genie to come out. And that's like our creative genius coming out and expressing itself through this magic.
Yeah, I love that. I love your gorgeous visual mind. And yeah, totally. And like as I think that has a parallel to so many aspects of my life, because really letting that genie of my pleasure and my eroticism come out has been it has been the opening to so many dreams, so many desires, so much just richness in my life. And so what a perfect, poetic, creative little visual you gifted me.
I also wonder, because I have been reading your posts, which are so beautiful. You really guys have to check them out, which I'm sure you already do. So you were speaking about shame, how we are so ashamed of our genitalia, our sexuality, and you've been pushing by inspiring people towards this liberation of this shame that weighs heavily on us. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, I just want to acknowledge, if you can hear that background wind and rain, it's because there's a storm outside.
Oh, bring me some. It's so hot in here.
Yeah, and I love that question. And there's so much that we could go into in there, because shame and sexuality is a thing that so unfortunately is so commonly linked together, and is something that all of us really, really hold. And there's a lot that comes up for me in that question is, how does shame live in our minds? How does shame live in our bodies? And how does shame inform our actions? And for me, I think the first layer that I really started to unpack was, how was shame around sexuality living in my mind? What were the things that I was telling myself about my body, about my pleasure, about the way that I was doing sex? Which was a really powerful starting point, was just saying, and this is something people, I really invite you to do yourself, is really get curious on what are the things you are telling yourself about your sexuality, about your body. How is that actually informing your experience and contributing to your experience? And I think that's the point where a lot of people stop. And it's really important to also go into the body. Like, how do I actually physically experience shame? When do I notice it comes up more often? Is it in relation to, the way that I feel that my genitals look? Is it related to my orgasm or my lack of orgasm? Is it related to body? Is it related to my taste, my smell? And really understanding, like, what does that feel like in my body? And something that's really powerful to do from that point is practicing, how can I meet this with acceptance? How can I just acknowledge this? And the best way to allow ourselves to do that is really by saying, where did I learn this stuff? Because what I know to be true, what I see over and over and over again, is that the shame that we carry is not our fault. It has come from so many societal, religious, systemic things that have informed this shame in us. And it is not ours to carry, but it is also, it's not our fault. And so, when we can understand that, it creates the space for us to understand that shame is there trying to protect us from something. Shame is there trying to contribute to our sense of belonging. And so, that can sometimes support that ability to reach out with acceptance. And then the last thing that I mentioned was, how is shame informing our actions? So I love to just get curious sometimes about, is my cat. Hi, Cat. She's coming to chat about the pussy related conversation.
Exactly.
So I was saying, like, am I choosing from a place of shame, or am I choosing from a higher wisdom within me, from a part of me that feels more resilient? So those three things together can be really good ways to start thinking about how you carry shame. But it's important to acknowledge that it's a real process to heal and integrate that, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
I love that, especially because it keeps us from really connecting deeply to this power, to this genie, right? Like, I have seen women so frightened to touch their bodies. Like, they feel like there is huge shame, religious shame, and even societal shame. I have heard women thinking that it would be like betraying their partners if they found pleasure on their own. and not through their partners. So there are so many beliefs that are limiting our experience, but I love the compassion that you are using to describe this process of shame, like it's a sensation, that it's protecting us, and we can learn how to listen to it with this compassion. I just love that. And I wonder what happens when a person starts connecting with this motivation of her shame, and starts liberating herself from this shame. What is the treasure beyond this?
What is the pleasure beyond the shame?
The treasure, because I think that it's like if shame was the guardian of a treasure, like the dragon guarding a treasure.
Oh,
So
treasure, yes.
So, well, if shame was this dragon guarding this treasure, this gold, what could that gold be? What's lying beneath this shame?
Yeah, what a gorgeous question. And I think that question of what is underneath this, what is lying beneath this, as you so gorgeously said, can be so, so powerful. You know, what I've found underneath, like what the treasure is to me, is actually something that feels incredibly normal. You know, I was talking to my partner about this the other day, and I said to him, it's sometimes funny and hard for me to really recognize how far I have come in my own healing journey, because it feels like I'm returning to something so normal that feels like such a place of home within,
Mhm.
that it doesn't feel altogether new whilst also feeling really new. You know, I've never experienced it before, but it just makes so much sense. um, and so, you know, like I feel that, whilst also feeling like underneath this shame is just so much bigness, is the way that I summarize it.
Yes.
Bigness in, just, you know, sexuality is such a powerful place to be able to play with the fullness of the spectrum of humanness, of, you know, bigness, smallness, like grief, anger, like pleasure, pain. Like there's so much that can be under this beautiful umbrella, or within this beautiful treasure chest. And so, you know, I feel this sense of homecoming the more that I integrate and heal my shame, but also this increasing sense of bigness as well.
I love that so much. Now, there is something that has become very natural for us, but I'm pretty sure that it's not so much for people outside our communities, which is how we define self-pleasure. Because maybe for people that are not in this kind of world, the tantric world, it's like, so what, do I just take a vibrator and go and masturbate, and that's going to liberate me? Just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, is that what it takes? So how would you define like a healthy self-pleasure process?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So to me, I love to think about self-pleasure as being, you know, I think a lot of people, you're right, they think self-pleasure is masturbation. There's quite like a rigid view and a limited view of what constitutes self-pleasure. But, you know, like I know you do, take on a much broader definition. So I think of self-pleasure as sexual pleasure, sensual pleasure, soothing pleasure, and also therapeutic pleasure as well. To me, it's anything, no matter how big, no matter how small. It doesn't even have to be sexual. Um, that just offers your body and your mind pleasure. And so I love to expand this definition, because I think it's important for us to recognize that, you know, different types of pleasure are accessible to people in different ways, depending on your history, depending on your background, depending on your privilege, depending on, you know, the week you've had, depending on your body. And so, what I love is when we can say, self-pleasure doesn't have to look any one way. There's so much creativity that can be used when it comes to self-pleasure. Like self-pleasure can be giving your hands like the most luscious massage where you really just do so with an intention of receiving pleasure from this touch. And so, that was the first thing that came to mind, which is just expanding the definition. And then I've forgotten the second part of your question. Would you so kindly remind me?
Like, how would you describe a healthy process of self-pleasure?
Yeah.
I think you already described one very, 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 very important point, which is intention. I love that you mentioned intention, and that you mentioned that it doesn't have to be sexual, but it can be sensual or soothing, or therapeutic. I love that you are taking these parts into consideration.
Yeah, thank you. And I love your use of the word healthy, because I think there's so much for us to explore in that. I personally am of the belief that there's no one thing when it comes to self-pleasure, unless it's harming anyone, of course, that is unhealthy.
Yeah.
So this can be a somewhat controversial opinion potentially. But for instance, like I do not believe that consuming pornography is unhealthy. I do not believe that, say, using vibrators is unhealthy. I think it all depends on the relationship we have with these things that are in our life and how we experience them. And so to me, healthy looks different for everyone. But in that word, like healthy, there's also so much room for all of us as humans to enrich our lives with more pleasure that I firmly believe will only contribute to our health. And so, yeah, should we talk about some kind of things people can try when it comes to like experimenting with different self-pleasure stuff as a means to find their own healthy kind of self-pleasure thing? Does that feel good?
Absolutely, because the question comes from this idea. I also believe that pornography is not necessarily evil, but it's also how you use it, right? So I have found that many people consider a self-pleasuring habit just to watch porn, touch themselves quickly, and that's it, they are done. And they don't really get to connect to their body, to nourish their body. It's more about like this, getting something out of their system. So how would you suggest that they sometimes I hate not speaking in my natural language. It's like I have to reframe, that's the word. How would you suggest that people could reframe pleasure in a way that it's nourishing? Maybe not so much about healthy, because you're right, there's not necessarily something that it's healthy or unhealthy unless you use it in that way, but how could you suggest somebody to use pleasure in a nourishing way?
Yeah, totally. I love that. And I love how through this conversation we're breaking down like just language around pleasure, because I've never thought about that myself until this conversation about how there's so much healing that can come from just rethinking the language that we use. So yeah, nourishing self-pleasure practices. I think one of the biggest things that I always invite my own clients to do is to slow down. I think one of the biggest things that I see is with habitual self-pleasure is like you awesomely described, is this habit of, okay, I'm going to chuck on some porn, I'm going to whip out either a vibrator, I'm going to start like stimulating myself really at quite a fast pace just to bust one out. And you don't really give your body the opportunity to really be present with the sensations that are arising, to really feel how your pleasure moves in your body, to really like be in that experience. And so slowing down is a really great way to break some of those habits. and when I say break habits, I don't think we ever need to get too concerned about like stopping certain things when it comes to self-pleasure, because what just happens in the mind is if we say you can't do that or you shouldn't do that, it becomes even harder to let go of that. I think it's about adding. It's about adding new things, keeping your old faithful self-pleasure habits and adding in new ones as well. So slowing down is one thing that's amazing. Breathing deep into the belly or breathing deep into your genitals as you self-pleasure, and letting go of any kind of goal or result. Like when we're fixed on the orgasm as being the purpose, as being the intention, it creates, or it just gives you a lot less space to really be in your body, to really let all of this pleasure and energy like fuse into your cells. But when we can, to bring it back to what you were saying at the start, Sasha, is can we change the intention around this? Can we make it, okay, I want this to be nourishing. I want this to be therapeutic. This is a self-pleasure session that I am entering into with this like intention to give my body something that it otherwise doesn't often receive. So slowing down, breathing, and relaxing the body is another amazing one. So often we speed up, we tense up everything, and really being able to just like relax the muscles in and around the genital area, relax the whole body so your sexual energy can move. Tension can be a really awesome thing too, but inviting in relaxation as a tool to use, amazing.
I love that. I love all of these points. They are so, so, so important, and they hold so much power. So we have spoken about how pleasure doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. I remember that there was a point, like you don't know guys, but in our training there was a point in which we had to masturbate like daily for a year. So at some point we were and not like quickly, it was like 1 hour practices. So at some point some of us were tired and I remember that there was a point in which I was just like, okay, this practice, I'm just going to stroke my hair. I just need to stroke my hair. And that's going to be my self-pleasure practice. I don't want to touch my genitalia. It's tired, it's sore, it has had enough. I'm just going to go and give myself a good scalp massage.
Yes. I was right there with you. I love that you mentioned this, because I don't think I ever actually talked to anyone about this during our time together in the program, where there were times where I just honestly was like, no, I cannot. Pussy says no.
Time out. No.
Yeah, totally.
And again, it was so pleasurable. I remember that those times I got so much nourishment just from rubbing my arms, my scalp, my neck, and it was like, hey, this is what I needed to nourish myself, to soothe myself. So that was the idea of that practice, and I think that was precisely what we got from it. It was with intention, we slowing down, removing the idea of orgasm, with taking care of our breath, breathing deep into our genitalia. And all of these parts together work beautifully. They work magic. They are so nourishing.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I think what I was really thinking about when you said that is, in the past when I've thought about just touching myself in a sensual or soothing way, I wouldn't get as much out of it until I started to really change my mindset around it. That, okay, I'm going to do this with immense presence. I'm going to really think about this as a self-pleasure act. I'm going to breathe and slow down and relax as well, and bring those tools to something that otherwise seems really simple, that is, perhaps oversimplified, or if you simplify it, you just don't reap the rewards. So yeah, I love illustrates how applying all of this wisdom to simple kind of touch and simple pleasures is two thumbs up.
Exactly. And especially because we learn to do this automatically, and we do sex automatically, and we do everything like automatically. We don't really think about it anymore. We just go. And I say, it's go like boom, 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 you're done, bye. In and out, boom, 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 out. And that's so automatic that we are not really present. So the power of just being present and slowing down, it's what conscious self-pleasure trains us to do.
Yeah, you are so right. And you just inspired me to talk about that whole being on autopilot when it comes to self-pleasure and also sex. Is I believe it's because of all of the fear, all of the shame that surrounds it. We feel much safer following what's been prescribed to us, when in reality, exploring your authentic sexuality, exploring the fullness of your pleasure is like going into the wilderness. It's finding new paths that we've never before walked down. And that is really scary, because how do we know if we're doing it right? How do we know, like, if we might find something we don't like? And that can bring up all kinds of discomfort, all kinds of feelings of failure, all kinds of things. So there's like a real, like, let's just keep doing this. And so I love, through these conversations, my hope is that we normalize this. We give people permission so that they can go into the wilderness of their own bodies and really just feel what they were expertly crafted, expertly built to actually feel in their bodies.
Yeah, I love that. Like, just to close with this metaphor of the genie in the bottle, you don't have to just go and rub it. You have to seduce the genie into coming out, right?
Absolutely. That's very sensual.
Genie, come to me.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining in this conversation. I am so sure that people are going to get so much from this. We spoke about shame, we spoke about redefining self-pleasure and how much power it holds for us and how we can explore that in our daily life. So we have gotten so much from this conversation. Thank you so much.
Wow, and thank you, my gorgeous sister. I adore you. It's so good to talk about this stuff. Thank you for having me. Mwah.
So, yay!